Welcome to Secrets Unlocked. If you enjoy intimate confessions and forbidden stories, check the private archive linked in the description. Subscribe, settle in, and enjoy the story. The reek of refuse mingled with the tang of the sea air once more assailed Morgan Reinhardt's senses. He thought he'd grown used to it twice already, but the pungent stench caused him to wrinkle his nose and hold his breath again. Too hot for October, he thought as he tried to ignore the stink caused by the trash floating all along the shoreline, the result of a garbage barge sinking for reasons unknown a few weeks earlier. The breeze shifted, bringing welcome relief from both the heat and the odor. Brushing a strand of coal-black hair out of his brown eyes, he glanced down at his watch. Seeing that the time was after midnight, he stroked his goatee and tried to decide whether to move now or wait a little longer. As a few clouds passed in front of the moon, Morgan determined that he would have no better opportunity to approach. After more than a month of observation and careful planning, he truly doubted that his caution was even necessary. Morgan left his place of concealment, creeping up on the blind side of the wall surrounding the mansion. The gentle slope behind the wall served to conceal everything on the seaward side. A quick peek through the gate revealed darkened windows and no sign of life, as usual. With no alarm and no dogs, he expected this would be easy. The house was huge, and he'd observed only one resident who never appeared to leave. A lone woman wasn't much of a threat, even if she did discover him in the house when he wasn't ready. The light posts on either side of the gate provided a ridiculously easy means of gaining the top of the wall. With strength and practiced skill, Morgan shinned up the pole, grasping the top of the wall and carefully eyeing the house one final time. He rolled over the top of the wall and dropped into a crouch at the base. With nothing to conceal him in the open courtyard beyond the wall, Morgan jogged in a crouch toward the house, his carefully placed footfalls making almost no sound. Glancing through a nearby dingy window, he saw furniture covered in plastic. The disrepair of the home's exterior and the disuse within the room encouraged Morgan rather than discouraging him, however. He'd seen the opulence of the inhabited portion of the house through his binoculars often enough. Snapping open a knife, he pressed the tip against the aged wood of the window, angling the razor-sharp blade upward and toward the latch. With measured pressure, he pushed the blade through the wood. The latch resisted his blade for a few seconds, but broke free with a quiet pop. The warped wood protested his attempts to raise the window after years of disuse, but also relented with a slight groan. Morgan climbed in through the window and stuck his head back out to check left and right for any signs of someone having noticed him. Confident that he'd entered without detection, he closed the window and knelt down to pick up the slivers of wood dislodged during the break-in. He dropped them in his pocket out of habit to hide the obvious evidence of his entrance. Creeping across the hardwood floor, he silently grunted in approval when the boards didn't creak alarmingly beneath his feet. Either the interior was far better maintained than the exterior, or the floors had been exceedingly well crafted. Still, he refused to commit his full weight to any step without care. Kneeling in front of a dresser, he lifted the plastic covering and blew out a breath of surprise that would have whistled had he allowed it. Pulling a tiny flashlight from a sheath on his belt, he examined the delicate handles on the revealed drawers. "Looks like gold to me," he thought. "If I ever see the guy that tipped me off to this place again, I'll have to buy him a beer." Crazy drunk. The door opened with only a minuscule creak, granting Morgan access to the remainder of the house. He crept down the hall toward the inhabited portion of the mansion, wishing he could carry away the paintings along the walls. People paid through the nose for artwork, and a lot of them would stay quiet about nearly anything to attain something truly unique. The silence of the house was almost disconcerting. A building as old as this one should creak and groan almost constantly, especially in a breeze, but this place was as silent as a tomb. A smile spread across Morgan's lips as he stepped into the rear entrance foyer of the house, seeing the glint of precious metals everywhere in the moonlight filtering through the huge windows flanking the door. The doors in this portion of the house were open, revealing magnificently carved furniture, obviously antique and expensive. Morgan felt like a kid in a candy store, unsure what to select when everything looked so good. A look in the dining room revealed flatware that he was sure was pure silver and real bone china. The dining room would easily seat 20, and the various cabinets around the room housed enough settings to fill that room a dozen times without washing a single fork. A vanity within one of the guest rooms had scrimshawed, ivory-handled brushes and combs sitting atop it, alongside ivory boxes trimmed in silver and gold. More of the same resided within the drawers of the vanity. Morgan felt as though he were creeping through a museum at night, rather than a home. There's definitely something not right about this place, he thought. Only one set of double doors was closed, which Morgan guessed opened into the master bedroom. Behind that door was what had originally attracted him to the old place and his main goal for the evening. Whatever he could steal was just a bonus. He approached the doors, remembering the woman he had seen through his binoculars. The house was out here all alone, surrounded by wealth that he would soon take his share of as well. The door was unlocked and easily swung open on well-oiled hinges. The room was just as opulent and archaic as the rest of the house, and he had no doubt that it actually held far greater treasures than anywhere else. If the jewels he'd seen adorning the woman were any indication, she had a treasure trove hidden in jewelry boxes somewhere in this room. She lay on the bed, and Morgan approached. Somehow, she sensed his presence. She sat up with a slight start, but then relaxed and said, "Oh, have you come to tell me your story? Do you want to relive your life with me? I know it hurts, but I'll help you. I just knew that one of you would come for All Hallows, so I wore something pretty to bed." "What the fuck, bitch is crazy. You just stay nice and quiet and don't fight me." "I won't fight you unless you need me to," she responded. "You're different from the others. My name is Denise. What's yours?" "Peter," he lied. He intended to take full advantage of the situation, his eyes locked on her as he prepared to cross the final line. He climbed onto the bed, completely crossing the final line. In that room, the boundary between them was broken, and he took full advantage of the situation. Denise offered no resistance, and Morgan focused entirely on the act. Afterward, the lethargy of his climax caught him unawares, and he fell asleep. Morgan awoke to his strained bladder demanding attention. He winced as he rolled out of her arms, and then the bed, the zipper and button of his still-dropped pants having left stinging impressions on his skin. He shook his head in disbelief at the blonde curled up in the bed with a smile on her face. The temptation to stay was strong, but his sense of self-preservation and greed overwhelmed simple desire. He jerked up his trousers, leaving them undone, and headed for the bathroom. Morgan looked around as he drained his bladder, almost in disbelief of the bathroom. The tub would easily allow 2 people to stretch out in it. Gold and silver trimmed fixtures and decoration met his eyes throughout the room. The room was almost as big as his apartment. After a sigh of relief, he zipped up his pants and stretched. May as well take my time finding what I want. A pillowcase stitched with what he suspected was gold thread served him well as he emptied jewelry boxes. Even at fence prices, this shit's gotta be worth 100 thou. I'm rich, he thought with a chuckle. Now curious about what else he might find in the house, Morgan decided to go exploring. He noticed bar latches on the outside of the double doors to the bedroom and thought, that's pretty fucked up. With the phone lines cut, that should keep her where I can find her. Closing the doors and latching them, he moved down the hall into the inhabited portions of the house that he hadn't checked out yet. Now completely without worry, he kept his flashlight on, shining it on anything that looked interesting in the rooms along the hallway. "What have we here?" he muttered, stepping into a huge room at the end of the hall. The walls were lined with trophy heads. Everything from a deer to a black bear adorned the walls, a stuffed zoo of senseless violence and greed. Smaller animals stood on shelves around the room. Somebody was out to kill one of everything, he chuckled. As he crossed the room, he felt as if the eyes of the animals were following him. Never liked these goddamn things. A large group of small paintings adorned the wall between two massive fireplaces, the focus of the room. Morgan examined them and wondered what kind of weird taste had selected them. One showed a funeral, titled images of sorrow according to the gold plate on the frame. Another showed a woman's face, her mouth open in a wide, insane-looking grin. Pictures of delight, the plaque named the painting. Endless days of summer, longer nights of gloom, waiting for the morning light, Morgan read from the plaques as he looked at the paintings, each a little more disturbing than the last. No fucking wonder she's apeshit, he thought, shaking his head and walking away. As he turned, he noticed a bar just beyond the macabre art gallery with several crystal decanters arranged upon it. After examining one in the light, he removed the stopper and sniffed. Eyes lighting up, he took a sip. Oh, fuck yeah, scotch. Good shit, too. He took a long pull, just enough to warm him and give him a little buzz when it kicked in. After a few seconds of experimentation, he found that the decanter fit within the deep pocket of his jacket. Seeing a wooden cigar box, he opened it and examined one of the cigars within. Cubans. I'd bet my left nut on it. Crazy bitch has somebody smuggling for her. 3 cigars went into each of the 2 breast pockets of his jacket. A glitter at the end of the room caught his eye, drawing him toward it. Oh, hell yeah, jackpot, he thought as he beheld the display case full of coins. These will sell just as well as any of those paintings. Finding that the case wasn't even locked, he swung open the doors and let his makeshift bag fall open. He plucked the coins from their places, depositing them within the pillowcase one by one, whistling a song he'd heard in a pirate movie once. Help me, someone, let me out of here. Morgan whirled toward the faint voice, drawing a gun and aiming. Though the words might very well match the plight of the woman down the hall, the voice sounded masculine. Though he saw nothing, he didn't think he could have imagined the voice. Dropping into a crouch, hoping to utilize the furniture as cover, he moved back through the room, his gun held before him at the ready. Sit down. As before, the voice was quiet and had a quality like wind howling through trees. As best as he could determine, the voice had emerged from somewhere near the doorway through which he had entered the room. Training his weapon on the doorway, he moved more carefully, his eyes and ears straining against the gloom. Sit down. The voice sounded like that of an old man this time, croaking and more insistent. 3 more times Morgan heard the words, always coming from the doorway toward which he slowly moved. Sit down. This time, the voice had the timbre of a shouted command, but the volume of a whisper, inches away from his ear. Morgan whirled, backing away from the voice and nearly firing his weapon at nothing, for that is all he saw as he stumbled, falling into a chair. Breathing heavily and unsure whether to be pissed off beyond words or scared shitless, Morgan looked and listened. Only silence greeted him, the unnatural silence of the old house. Goddamn, what was in that fucking scotch, LSD? Fucking spooky old shithole has me imagining ghosts. Levering up from the chair, he waited for the voice to protest again. After a minute or so, he shook his head with a snort and defiantly crossed the room back to the display case. Despite his adamant refusal to accept anything supernatural, he couldn't help but glance up at the huge boar head above the case frequently as he deposited coins in his bag. The disembodied head appeared to be staring down at him in accusation. He kept his gun in hand. Giving the bag a twist to secure it, he extended his middle finger to the leering boar and spun on his heel. Tucking the gun back in its holster, he defied the weird hallucination with another pull from the decanter of scotch. Here's to you, spooks. Fuck you and the headless horseman you rode in on, he sneered under his breath. The satisfying jingle of the bag in his hand chased away any thoughts of ghosts and disembodied voices. He stepped back out into the hall. He threw open the bolts, and had just pulled the doors open when something moved in his peripheral vision. Morgan turned and froze in terror. Rising up through the floor, he saw a man-shaped shadow. The apparition drifted slowly toward the ceiling and then leveled out to move toward him. A second shadow seeped through the wall, and then a third. Yet another emerged from the ceiling. He raised his gun in an unsteady hand, tracking the spirits for a few seconds, until the hallways were so filled with shadows that it was difficult for him to distinguish individual specters. The apparitions drifted aimlessly, accompanied by a whispered cacophony of unintelligible words. Morgan jerked and fell against the door jamb when one of the shadows brushed his hand in passing. The touch chilled him to the bone, and for a fraction of a second, reality vanished. The shadow-filled hallway became a swing set in a backyard with two children whooshing down the slide. He felt a swell of happiness rush through him, and then the vision was gone. Almost as soon as the vision vanished, another of the shadows passed through his chest. Again, he saw somewhere else, as though he was peering down from the top of a skyscraper at the traffic below. Sadness and bitterness flooded through him, actually bringing a tear to his eye as the darkened hallways snapped back into focus. Morgan cried out and fired his weapon as a specter moved toward him. Feeling the tension build, thousands of more private stories are waiting in my exclusive archive. The link is in the channel description. Though the shadow image of a beautiful woman, her eyes were filled with despair, and her mouth was open in a silent, terrifying scream. The shadow passed through him, and a terrifying vision of betrayal and assault overwhelmed his senses, causing him to panic from the sudden rush of pain and fear. Morgan doubled over and screamed as the vision vanished. He stumbled backwards into the bedroom, his feet tangling and his knees weak. As one, the shadows outside ceased their chaotic dance, emitting a tremendous sigh and then a terrible moan. Morgan heard the beginning of the moan and then nothing more. He managed to throw his hands behind him to arrest his fall, but solidly cracked his head on some stout piece of furniture. Blackness descended upon him. Morgan regained consciousness with agonizing slowness. His head felt stuffed with cotton, as though he was awakening from an all-night bender. His eyes were gummy, and his mouth was dry. When he managed to open his eyes, he realized he was in the bed, and it was still night. Denise was beside him, and the boundary between them was broken once more as they engaged in an intense, feverish encounter. Morgan lost himself completely in the moment, driven by a sudden, overpowering haze of desire that pushed away the fragmented memories of the nightmare he'd experienced. When it was over, Denise looked at him and said, "You taste good." Morgan let his arms fall to his side, weak and twitching. Almost before he knew what was happening, he was drawn right back into her presence. The overwhelming atmosphere of the room took over, and he found himself completely yielding to the encounter, entirely drunk on the situation as the night continued. As he sat up, Denise lay down with a languid moan. Morgan looked around for his gun, which he didn't feel in the holster at his side. He also realized that he was no longer wearing his jacket. He looked into the floor to find both, as well as the pillowcase full of jewelry and coins. "You don't need those, you have me," she said. "Stay with me, talk to me, hold me." Holy fuck, that wasn't a dream. His hair standing on end, Morgan lurched from the bed and jerked up his pants. He snatched up his things from the floor as soon as he managed to button his trousers. "You can't go," she pleaded as she sat up and reached for him. "I can protect you, but you have to be with me. It's All Hallows they're too strong. I can only protect you if you stay with me." "You're crazy," Morgan snarled, his hand snapping out to strike her hard across the mouth. She cried out as her head snapped to the side, and she fell to the bed. Morgan shoved his arms into the sleeves of his jacket, keeping a close eye on Denise as she struggled to rise. "You can't go," she screeched as he walked away from the bed, checking his gun and finding it still loaded. "You have to stay here." Morgan turned on her and aimed his gun. His finger trembled on the trigger, and he nearly fired off the shot. With a snarl, he let his arm fall to his side and repeated, "You're fucking crazy," as he kicked open the doors to the bedroom. "You can't get away," she screeched as Morgan briskly walked down the hall toward the rear entrance of the house. "No, with us you will stay. For the rest of your days." The voices were not whispers this time, sounding clear and loud from everywhere. When the man-shaped shadows once more drifted into view, Morgan ran. Hurtling down the hallway as fast as his legs could carry him, he saw the salvation of the huge double doors that opened to the outside world. More shadows appeared in the entrance foyer, no longer drifting, but darting in a frantic and dizzying dance before him. The shadow of a man, his face twisted in rage, passed through Morgan before he could deviate from his course. As before, the world vanished and he relived a moment from the specter's life. His partner turned. He saw the gun. He saw the flash. He felt the bullet tearing into his brain and exploding out the back of his head. The foyer was gone. Morgan ran headlong into a couch, slamming his body into the antique wood. He slumped over the couch. He could barely breathe. Snorts and roars erupted from all around him. He opened his eyes and looked around, finding all the animal heads along the walls desperately wrenching, as though attempting to pull free from their moorings. Every set of dead eyes was focused on him. With a grating of wood on wood, the couch shot across the floor to crash into another, sending Morgan tumbling to the floor. He dropped his gun in the fall, and it slid several feet away. Morgan scrambled toward his gun, abandoning the bag of loot in his hand. Just as he reached for the weapon, it scooted away several more feet, accompanied by the sound of mocking laughter. The shadows erupted from everywhere, the volume of their unintelligible gibbering ear-piercing. Morgan managed to regain his feet, covering his ears and screaming to counter the maddening sounds assaulting him. Half-blinded by tears of pain, he spun and tripped over a chair before he could take a second step. He crawled on his hands and knees, managing to get his feet under him to run once more. With no shadows in front of him, he ran for his life in abject terror. When he reached the intersection of the hall in front of the master bedroom, he just caught sight of Denise standing in the doorway and barely heard her voice. Angling his flight, he slammed into the wall to change his direction, his heart pounding and his legs pumping toward the freedom of the outside. He slammed into the double doors at full speed, but the wood refused to yield. He rebounded from the stout portal and immediately grabbed the door handle. The knob refused to turn. Desperately, he grabbed both knobs and slammed his shoulder into the seam between the doors. It wasn't supposed to be this way, he heard Denise say as he slammed the door again. Morgan turned, continuing to slam his back against the door. "Get away from me. You were supposed to stay with me and keep me warm." She emerged into the moonlight from the hall, revealing her split lip and twin trails of blood trickling from her nose. The shadows surged into the foyer, flowing around Denise as if she was a rock in a stream of nightmares. Seizing upon her apparent immunity to the horrors of the house, Morgan blurted out, "I'll stay with you. Just make them go away." Her lips pursed and her brow furrowed. You hit me because you were angry, not because you like it." Morgan darted to the side, grabbing an ornately carved hat rack standing next to the door. He stabbed the top toward the woman, who stood staring at him with her brow furrowed in anger. As she took a step back, he thrust the hat rack like a battering ram to smash the huge window next to the door, but something snatched the heavy weapon out of his hands with unnatural strength. He screamed as one of the posts shattered bones in his wrist, before the hat rack hurtled across the room to skid across the tiled floor. The foyer darkened, the moon's light obscured by a black cloud outside. The shadows darting only a few feet away outside her protected circle melded with the natural darkness, becoming a single undulating mass of terrible night. Invisible hands grasped Morgan's wrists, jerking them above his head and out wide. Another fisted in his hair, pulling his head against the door with a painful thud. His ankles were likewise held in an icy, unbreakable grip. Morgan struggled as Denise approached, her face twisting into a terrible visage of bitter hatred. She bared her teeth, her countenance all the more terrible in the low light, surrounded by the living night. "Nobody hits me," she hissed from between her clenched teeth. "I'll never do it again, just make them go away." A gleam of light revealed the blade in her hand. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," she snarled. Morgan screamed in terror, lurching and jerking against the chill digits digging into his flesh. "No." The shadowy mass filling the room broke out into a chorus of mocking laughter. Morgan screamed, trying to drown out the sound stabbing into his brain as he continued to struggle with all his considerable strength. One specter separated from the rest, moving closer. As it drifted into the faint remnants of moonlight, Morgan recognized it and knew the truth. The apparition was the old drunk who'd told him of this place. The shadow spirit's face twisted into a smug, hate-filled grin. Denise raised the knife over her head, her features softening. She pouted, the image marred by the blood still trickling from her lip and nose. "I'm sorry." Then, from out of the dark, he suddenly heard, "Welcome to the home by the sea." The knife plunged down, and the shadows engulfed him. I hope you enjoyed this story. More intimate confessions are waiting in the private archive linked in the description. Subscribe for the next story.